What's going on, FA Nation? Welcome back. This is the Fantasy Alarm NASCAR DFS podcast. I'm Dan Malin, and I'm joined, as always, by our FSWA three-time NASCAR Writer of the Year, Matt Selz. Matt, we are coming off a very boring Bristol race, which is incredibly disappointing because the spring race was great. That tire fall off, but in the next-gen era, we rarely see one driver dominate a race like that, especially one with 500 laps. But Kyle Larson led 462 of 500, and he just ran away with it. And it was very uneventful. It was quick for a Bristol race, too. It was just not very good.
It was very quick. There were basically no cautions, at least on par with other Bristol races. If you suffered a penalty on pit road, you were basically toast because there was no cautions to, skip and get back on the lead lap. Larson was lapping everybody under the sun, although I will say there's more guys that finished on the lead lap in this race than there were earlier this year when there was only 5 guys on the lead lap. Historic performance. Larson led the most amount of laps in a race of any Hendrick driver ever in the history of that famed team. So that's impressive. I do feel bad. Like, he's taking it personally, though, because Jeff Gluck put out the poll and they got 27.2% yes, which is the lowest rated Bristol race. And so Larson quote tweeted it and was like, but if there was 2 overtimes and chaos at the end, it would have gotten like a 97% yes. I said, and I'm like, why are you taking this personally, dude?
Yeah, it's
like,
a little.
The whole race was terrible. There was no passing. Like, the top 10 basically started and finished where they started and finished, with the exception of like 2 guys. It's not just you. If any, like, Brad Keselowski led 460 something Martinsville laps a couple years ago, and that's the worst Martinsville race on record. Until it happened again in the fall race, and then that supplanted it. It's just a product of, we were told by Goodyear that the tires were the same as the spring race. Spring race had tire fall off. Spring race, the tires were only lasting like 60, 70 laps.
Yeah.
They went 150 without a problem. And on Door Bumper Clear, they were talking about some of those cars just went until they ran out of gas, and then they didn't even have to worry about the tires. Like, there's no way it's the same tires that were in the spring, because there's no way the teams got that much better about preserving tires in 4 months when they can't figure it out anywhere else. So it's a product of that, plus the short track package, or even the intermediate package on a short track with no tire fall off doesn't really do anything. So, note to Kyle Larson, take your win, get back off of social media, like you say you're not usually on, and just keep focus on dominating and dirt track racing. Because it's not you, man. It's the fact that NASCAR can't tell us why it sucks, Goodyear can't tell us why it sucks, Bristol can't tell us why it sucks. Nobody.
And he's dominated races before that didn't get as low of an approval rating. It's not indicative of him. It's not that people are tired of seeing him win. We all kind of know he's the best driver in this series. It was just overall just a very bad and boring race. And it was quick, no cautions, no tire fall off. Like, if you got lapped, you were screwed.
Right, and going up against college football in prime time didn't exactly give you anything to turn away from, if there was a blowout you didn't want to watch, like K-State getting blown out by BYU. Didn't really give you the it factor. I watched the last 100 laps solidly through. I was flipping back and forth between K-State, which is my alma mater, and the Bristol race. And so I watched the last, third of that race, and nothing happened. It was Larson just clicking off laps. And there was some battle there for points between Suarez and Ty Gibbs and some other guys who got stuck a little further down in the order than they thought. But other than that, there was basically no drama to that race.
Yeah, even Lee Diffie, who has been great since they brought him on,
ran out of excitement.
I don't
blame him, though. Like, what's he supposed to do with a dud? Now they're all not going to be bangers, right? That's not what racing is. If it is, then arguably you have a problem with how the cars are being set up because they all shouldn't be that good. But yeah, it was a little tough there for Lee trying to come up with storylines to talk about and whatnot when nothing was being handed to him.
I mean, luckily it was a cutoff race. We did see Martin Truex Jr., Brad Keselowski, Harrison Burton, and Ty Gibbs all get knocked out of the playoffs. So there was still that excitement. And Daniel Suarez spent most of that race just laps down and just clinging on, just scrapped his way into the round of 12. Good for him.
Yeah.
But just a disappointing race. If you qualified poorly, you had very little chance of moving up.
Correct. So, and if you didn't have Larson and DFS, you were not winning anything.
All right. Well, we turn our attention to, near 200-point performance from Larson is.
That's insane. It may be, I don't know if it's the best one, but it's got to be close.
Yeah, it's probably up there with the Brad Keselowski performance from Martinsville a few years ago.
I think Truex probably has the best when he led 392 of 400 laps in the Coke 600.
Impressive. But we at least turn our attention to a track that should deliver on good racing, at least in the next-gen era. Kansas has been arguably the best track in this package, and with this car, it's 1.5 miles. It's an intermediate. They call it one of the cookie cutters, but at the same time, like, there are just so many grooves on this track. And earlier this year, it delivered the closest finish in NASCAR history when Kyle Larson beat Chris Buescher by, I think, 1/1000th of a second.
Yeah.
So I know I said last week was probably my last weekend doing 20-plus lineups. I think this week I might do 5, but overall, this is still a track that delivers phenomenal racing.
Yes. Kansas is always – we can always count on Kansas to put together great races. Occasionally, apologize. There's apparently an ESPN notification that got there, my do not disturb there, so that's excellent.
It happens.
We can always count on Kansas for great racing. It's because of the setup that we get. It's because of tire wear. It's because of multi-grooves that we get. The banking is just perfect to give multiple grooves of action and passing opportunities in the corners. So it's great. Plus, we also got to consider the fact that this is the only race in this stage in which you can argue drivers have the most control over their fates, right? Because the next 2 races in this round of 12, Talladega next week, and then the chaotic Charlotte Roval the week after that is the cutoff race, where we've seen all sorts of craziness happen, right? The first one we saw Jimmy Johnson take out Truex and Ryan Blaney won from third. One of them we saw Chase Elliott go into the turn 1 wall at one point and then come all the way back to win it. We've seen Kyle Busch or Kevin Harvick wrecked himself out because he was so nervous about
he was worried about Chase wrecking him out, and Chase was in his rear view, and I think Harvick went right into a wall.
Yes. And then Talladega's Talladega, right? So this is the race where everything is under their control. They can make up ground. We may not see cautions. We'll see. But there is strategy. You can make up ground if you can control tire wear better than other people. Then you can have late runs happen on the longer green flag runs. So, it's gonna be an exciting race. And guess what? DK figured out how to price things more properly than they did last week.
I think that's a pretty good segue.
I tried. So we're gonna go ahead and share like we normally do the DK pricing here, so we can talk about that. But they're gonna make us think this week, it seems, with how we want to build lineups.
We were talking about this before the podcast, and this is closer to what Kyle Larson should have been last week for a 500 lap race, as opposed to pricing him at 11.5 for a 267 lap race. But overall, I do like the slightly more aggressive pricing. Because as you said before we started recording, as soon as you plug in Kyle Larson into your lineup, the average remaining price per or salary per driver is $7,700 for
Right.
your
You
next
lose
five
you
drivers.
lose $600, more than $600 a spot on average just by plugging Larson in. If you decide you want to try to double up with Denny Hamlin, you are dumpster diving for the rest of your lineup there because your average goes to under 7K a spot. Um, and I mean, it's for good reason, right? Not only has Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson been arguably the best two drivers all season, although Denny has struggled down the stretch, except for last week where he had a top five finish there at Bristol.
Gets to keep his
Um,
dog.
he does get to keep his dog. I saw that clip on Twitter. Lulu, I think, gets to stay. Um, so that's great for the dog. Um, but these two, if we look back at the next gen stats at Kansas, they are the only two drivers that have managed to finish. There are five of these races, right? So from the start of 2022 through the spring race, here this year, those five races, Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson are the only two to finish in the top 10 all five times. Larson missed the top five once and he finished P8. So it's not like he missed it by that much. Denny Hamlin's the only one to finish in the top five all five of those races. Their average finish is, Denny Hamlin's is 2.8, Larson's is 3.4, the next closest is 7.5. So, and they've led the most laps each on average. They have the two best driver ratings, best average run position. So these two have clearly been the class of the field at Kansas in the next gen car. So it's not shocking to see them at the top. I'm just glad that we have to make a thinking game out of which one we're playing, or if we're trying to get both, just how bad do you want to make the rest of the lineup to fit both of them?
Yeah, I really like the fact that they are challenging you because off the top, like yeah, these two are probably the early contenders to go out and dominate. And it's really boring had they priced each of them like $2,000 cheaper. So I
And
like
by the
that
way, the
they're
last time Larson was this much was Dover.
yeah, and so I don't want it to be easy to build lineups. Like there should be a challenge, and so I like the idea that you can only and you can play both, but yeah, the rest of your lineup is probably going to suck. So I
Yeah.
like that they're saying, hey, you got to pick one or the other, and it'll boil down to qualifying. But I give them respect because last week the pricing was very soft for a 500 lap race. At least they're making it more challenging, even if they might be a little pricey for a 267 lap race.
Yeah. To be fair, Denny Hamlin's the same price as he was last week. Uh,
Was
he
he?
was 11,000 last week. He's 11,000 again. Um, but it just seemed like for a 500 lapper that 11 grand was too soft. I mean, he put up 59 points. And didn't even lead any laps because Larson didn't give anybody else the chance to do anything. Um, but the interesting ones come next with the next three guys that are 10K or above, with Tyler Reddick, Christopher Bell, and Chase Elliott. Because while I give them props for making Larson and Hamlin that expensive, I'm not 100% sure why they made some of these other guys that much.
I understand Bell. Um, I don't get Reddick. I think that's more DK, and I don't think they would big brain it enough to this extent. But at the same time, like that is the car that Kurt Busch won at Kansas in the spring of 2022.
Yeah, and it's also what Bubba won in
Later that year.
later that year because they swapped Bubba into the 45 because it was still in the owners championship at that point.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so it won twice there. But that seems like a stretch to me because if you actually look at Reddick's history at Kansas, outside of he has won, um, but outside of that and a P9, he's not finished better than P20 in the other three races, including two outside the top 30. So it's a little interesting. I do understand that the Seabell 1A, it's a JGR car that tends to do quite well at
Yeah.
Kansas. He also does, have 4 top 10 finishes in the 5 next gen races here, and has had a knack for leading some laps. But Chase Elliott's the other interesting one because it's not been a dominant Chase year. It's been a consistent Chase year.
Yeah.
But the 10K is making you pay for a dominant Chase, which we haven't really seen. So, I mean, he did finish 3rd here in the spring. He did finish 6th here in this race last year. He did move up 6 spots to do that in the spring. Normally, we're not seeing him lead all that many laps, not getting a ton of fast laps. So it just seems like they're playing on he's still the most popular guy. It's a track he's been solid at. Let's just price him up because we can get people to play him at a price that he probably should not be.
There isn't really a ton of correlation between Texas and Kansas, is there? Aside from the fact that they're, 1.5 mile intermediates.
Not a huge amount. I mean, Texas does have an okay amount of tire wear, but it's way steeper, and
Yeah.
there's typically speaking less grooves, less racing lines at Texas.
I only bring it up because Chase won there earlier in the year.
Yeah. He did have a good Texas race, starting 24th and winning, leading 39 laps. Is that that's the last race? No, he led 41 at New Hampshire. But
I only remember the Texas race because afterward Bubba said, "Well, now we can't get it off the schedule if the Golden Boy's going to win here."
yeah, that's true. I mean, he had a very good run at Bristol last week, but to jump him $1,000,
Yeah.
because he went from 10th to 2nd, that doesn't. I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see a little bit on Chase, in my opinion, before I'm comfy playing him at 10K. But we'll see. I mean,
Is there anybody in the 9K range that kind of jumps off the page at you? Obviously, the 2 Toyota drivers who are the cheapest of the 9K drivers, with Ty Gibbs and Bubba Wallace. I can officially say I have zero interest in playing Martin Truex Jr.
yeah, I think he just really wants to go bass fishing at this point. I think
Yeah.
I mean, he's been solid here. I'm not going to say he's stunk up the joint. He's got 4 top 10s in the next gen car. The problem is that he's also usually starting in or just outside of the top 10.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're getting mass PD, and he's not leading laps this year. This has been a much slower, much more, I want to say, trudgy 19 car, if we want to go with it. He's just trudging through the season. Once he announced he was retiring, I feel like he just kind of wants it to end.
Yeah. Feel bad for the guy. It would have been nice to see him get a win in his final season, and you can make the argument he probably should have won. I think it was Richmond earlier this year when he led over 200 laps, but
Yeah, and then got beat on the restart.
yes, and was pissed at his teammate for doing so. But what are you gonna do?
I mean, Blaney and Byron are always in play, but again, there's nothing hugely special that stands out about them here. They're both solid. Blaney's, not usually one to lead laps here. He's usually one that starts about the mid-teens to late teens and moves up and finishes just outside the top 12 or top 10. But that doesn't really do anything for me particularly. It's just going to be another solid race for Blaney. But Bubba, yeah, I mean, he's got a really good history here. You can make the argument he probably should have won twice in the last 5 races.
Yeah.
Because the one he finished 32nd, he probably should have won that one because he wrecked out of it. So yeah, he's intriguing, but everybody knows the same data we know, so he's gonna be It's one of those times where Bubba's going to be popular, even though he's not in the playoffs.
Can you say the same thing about Ty Gibbs? Almost like obviously he doesn't have a win in the Cup Series, and he also got bounced from the playoffs last week. Still searching for the first career Cup Series win. I thought he would have had it by now. Looked great to start the year, but then cooled off a little bit.
Yeah. I think he'll be again. I kind of want to lump him in with the Byron and the Blaney's, where I think he starts okay and I think he finishes okay, but in between, there's not going to be a whole lot of extra value there. Like he'll get some fastest laps. Like what did he do earlier this year here? The Advent Health 400. Like he started 6th, wasn't a good day. He had 7.
He must have wrecked.
He must have wrecked. But like if he starts in the top 10 and finishes in the top 10 and gets you 7 fastest laps, does that really move the needle for you?
Probably not, especially if most lineups are going to have one of Kyle Larson and or Denny Hamlin.
Right.
And if one of them dominates and wins. So it almost feels like Ty Gibbs. Because if you play one of those and then you play, like, let's just say you play Larson and Gibbs, you have 29,300 for the remaining 4 drivers, and you're pretty much looking for 4 value plays. Man, it is going to be hard to build lineups with just either Larson or Hamlin.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you'd almost need Ty Gibbs to have like a Coke 600 type performance where he started on the pole and led 74 laps and finished 6th. He got 55 points. Like that's the path to value for him. But I also don't see that happening.
No.
I mean, look, anything can happen. He can show up and have the fastest car and whatnot. But if you're banking on a guy to lead 70 laps of a 267 lap race and then only fall back a handful of spots to make it worth playing, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking at. I mean, I guess you could if he screws up qualifying and you're banking on him to finish in the top 5, kind of like Michigan. Okay, sure. Then he becomes playable. But again, that's like the only 2 scenarios where Ty Gibbs becomes playable at this point.
We do like some drivers in the 8K range, though.
Yes.
Hard to really lay off Chris Buescher. Got the win 2 weeks ago at Watkins Glen. Almost, and I say almost, and I can't stress this enough how close he was to winning this race in the spring. I mean, he was the leader as they were coming down the backstretch.
I mean, half the people watching thought he won, and the other half thought it was Larson. And
the broadcast thought he won. They were basically declaring it for Chris Buescher. I think his team was even cheering in their pit box.
Well, this was this was the race with the finish line is not painted on the apron, and so there was debate about if Larson had actually crossed it because it's not painted on the
apron.
Yeah. So you can't. Yeah, Buescher. And he was the only guy who seemed to be able to make some headway last week.
Well, yeah, started 17th, finished 14th. I feel like his running position was better than where he finished.
Correct. I think he faded late, but like with about 100 laps ago, he was kind of making headway.
I think he was in the top 10
on people. I feel like Chase Briscoe is interesting this week. And a guy who, for some reason, is finally getting into a groove at SHR with 7 races left of that team existing.
See, I really like Noah Gragson, and we can kind of touch on him as we go into the value tier. But at the same time, and it's almost like why I'm hesitant to go with Ross Chastain, who's at 7,800. He's just priced below these 8K drivers. But both Briscoe and Chastain are not in the playoff. Gragson and Chastain are both non-playoff drivers who I like this week, but they have teammates that are still in the playoffs. And so I'm left wondering if the organization gives Briscoe and Daniel Suarez a little more attention simply because they're still in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would think so. This is kind of the time, especially like we said earlier, that this is the only like kind of predictable race in this round. I would like the track history here to be a little better for Briscoe, but I do like what I'm seeing out of him now, so I'm going to lean a little bit more towards recency bias Briscoe. Not saying he's a guarantee lock in my lineups, but he's certainly interesting as a less popular pivot.
No, and I think you're right because like we can say what we want. He got the win at Darlington for second one of his career, but he's really justifying JGR taking a chance on him next year, taking over the 19 once MTJ retires. So whether he's going on this run for the playoffs or he just wants to give his future bosses some confidence, the kid is, or I can't even say he's a kid because I think he's like 29 years old and his wife is expecting twins.
Yeah,
but he is trending up at the perfect time.
yeah, I would agree. But the guy I really like in this range, who I think is massively underpriced, is Alex Bowman.
Yeah.
Like, I know I've said this for a few weeks in a row, but I do think they continue to miss. And basically, outside of a rough, like, the Glen wasn't even that rough. He just had a pit issue and then couldn't make up time.
Mm-hmm.
But he did kind of what I thought he was going to do at Bristol, which was lead the first chunk of laps and then cede to the faster guys who were behind him. But if you want to talk about Larson and Hamlin being clear cut the second or the top two drivers here in the next gen era, Bowman, the guy who I said the next best average finish was 7.5 earlier, that belongs to Alex Bowman.
Yeah.
He's top 5 in laps led. He's top 5 in driver average or driver rating in that span. He's scored on average the third most DK points. If you want to go FanDuel points, he's the fourth highest scoring guy in the 4 next gen races that he's run. Because remember, he missed one because of his injury. But he's finished in the top 10 all 4 of the next gen races he's run. He's finished 4th once, finished 7th here earlier this year.
Even that race that he finished 4th, that was the year Bubba won, and Bowman still led over 100 laps.
Yeah, he started 3rd, finished 4th, led over 100 laps. Like, I just don't get why Bowman continues to have success, and then he is easily the gimme Hendrick guy almost every week with this pricing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I like the guy as well. I mean, say what you will, but he got 44 points last week at $7,600. Started on the pole, so I mean, he almost got to 6x value at Bristol. Honestly, could probably get to 6x value. It's going to depend on where he starts for this race, but 4 straight top 10s here in the next gen car. Pretty much everything.
He averages 52.9 DK points.
Yeah.
So 6 times 8 is 48. So he's averaging better than 6x at this price. I just think it's a miss. Unless DK knows something we don't, which they tend to.
My favorite 7K driver is probably going to be Noah Gragson, who I touched on a little bit when we were discussing Chase Briscoe. Gragson does have a win here in the Xfinity Series. I think he's coming into this race with back-to-back top 12 finishes at the Glen and Bristol last week.
Yep.
The larger intermediates, Michigan and Indianapolis or Pocono, I think in 2 of those, I don't know that's off the top of my head. In 2 of those, I think he was like top 12 or top 15. And then even earlier this year, he was top 10 at Kansas.
Yeah, he was
6th of 8.
He was 9th at Indy and he was 12th at Michigan. I think he had some sort of issue at Pocono.
I think he had an issue early at Pocono.
Yes.
Too.
Yep.
But either way, like he's still doing really well on the intermediates, the larger ones, the comparable ovals, even earlier this year at Kansas. So
He finished ninth here earlier this year after starting third.
Yeah. I don't know. He's going to be with his third different Cup team in as many years next year, but overall, I think he's similar to Briscoe. I think he's closing out his tenure with SHR pretty well.
Yeah, I would agree. So if you feel better about the track history and pricing for Graxon, you could look at him over Briscoe because he is about $1,100 less than Briscoe. He's certainly interesting to me. I'm just refreshing my memory on Daniel Suarez's history here. This is a track he tends to struggle at. He's said before he hasn't fully figured it out yet, but he's on kind of a better run of late. So it's kind of a debate between eye test and track history with Suarez.
If he can have a good run here, because he got the round of 16, he was solid at Watkins Glen. He was really good at Atlanta. Pretty much put him in good enough position to advance on points into the round of 12.
Right.
If he can just get a decent enough finish, maybe some of the guys that are ahead of him in the standings, maybe they wreck out. Suarez has another super speedway coming down the pipeline just next weekend. Another good finish there. Maybe he can point his way in again, or if he just straight up wins Talladega next weekend, he's on to the round of 8. So there's certainly pressure. I think if he has a bad run here, he almost needs to win at Talladega. Track history aside, this is a playoff driver that's still alive. He's not terribly far out of, just being above the cut line. So we'll see where he qualifies. I know the track history is probably not on his side. There aren't many tracks that stand out as, Daniel Suarez is great here.
Correct.
So let's see where he qualifies and then just kind of go from there. But I'm of the mindset that Trackhouse wants to allocate more resources to the 99 car than the 1 car.
I would presume so. I mean, you got a playoff guy who, if he could scratch together, again, 2 solid finishes in the first two races of a round, can survive the third race of that round. Although he's been pretty solid on road courses, so it's not inconceivable.
Oh, that's true. The Roval's coming up. My bad. Okay. This might be his worst track of the round.
It might be, but he did run in Michigan earlier this year. He did run well at Texas, so they can kind of figure things out occasionally. He does have a top 10 previously at Kansas, although it's now 4 races ago. So, he's kind of another one where if he looks good on Saturday, he's probably in the discussion for lineups. Then after that, I mean, again, it's going to be ugly. Also, we have to talk about 2 guys in this range, Justin Haley and Corey LaJoie, are now officially swapping cars. I know it was announced before Bristol, but now it takes effect for Kansas. So Justin Haley goes to the 7. And LaJoie takes over the Rick Ware racing machine that Justin Haley has made look really, really good.
So let me ask you this, because any time that Briscoe and Keselowski have shown up with speed and just looked good at a track. Yeah, but almost by association, you almost feel the same level of confidence in Justin Haley when he was in the 51 car, because Rick Ware Racing has the affiliation with RFK. Do we now do the same thing with Corey LaJoie, who is probably less of a driver than Justin Haley? I think we can safely come to that conclusion.
Yeah, I think Justin Haley is a better driver all around than Corey LaJoie. I mean, Corey LaJoie, nice enough guy, but it's hard to argue that he has outperformed the equipment, unlike Justin Haley. It is an interesting question because we've had this debate a few times on this pod where we get like fill-in drivers where it's like, do you trust the equipment over the driver? Do you trust the driver over the equipment? And I think in this case, I'm going to trust the driver over the equipment, because here's why. We've seen Carson Hocevar make the Spire 77 car look pretty racy over the last several races, right? He's at least been able to hold where he's started in several of those. I know he's not been great, but like if you look at it, he's been decent enough in the 77 for Spire, and not just at like wild card races, right? He got a top 10 at Michigan. He got a top 10, top 12 at Indy. So I do think that I like Justin Haley getting the upside here over LaJoy. Because LaJoy just hasn't gotten anything out of his car, and Haley made a Rick Ware racing car look really, really good, Alliance aside. So I would say that Justin Haley is still in play. Corey LaJoy is forgettable.
Anyone else that kind of catches your eye that maybe we just haven't touched on?
Not right off. I don't really want to do a huge deep dive into guys down here. I know we'll have to play at least one of them to get some of the more expensive guys into the build, but nobody really sticks out as guys who are overachieving at Kansas. I mean, perhaps Austin Dillon's intriguing if RCR still shows up with that speed that they've had recently. He's got a decent enough history at Kansas in the next gen car. But other than that, nobody's really like jumping off the page here.
All right. What's your content schedule look like for this week? I know I've got Trucks and Xfinity once again this week. Those playbooks will be up at the latest by Friday.
Yeah, so I have a betting piece out either Thursday or Friday for this week. I will have the playbook out Saturday for Cup. We do get practice and qualifying Saturday. I believe it's afternoon. I can check the schedule here real quick. But yeah, it appears to be Saturday. Yeah, early afternoon, like lunch hour, basically. Saturday. So I will have the playbook out Saturday, I don't know, late afternoon, and then projections and roster ship up Sunday morning, early Sunday morning for folks. So that's kind of the lay of the land this weekend. We'll be in Discord as well. Doesn't appear to be any weather concerns this weekend in my neck of the woods. So that's always nice. So, but those of you in the southeast, stay safe there with the hurricane bearing down on the southeast. So,
yeah, I'm in Atlanta. It's basically just gonna be raining for the next 2 days, so kind of looking forward to it. But at the same time, looking forward to this race after last week's dud. But Matt, as always, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck to you this weekend for Kansas, and best of luck to the FA Nation.
Best of luck, FA Nation.